patterns. We want to learn some more. Let's get started. Okay, and now let me change my view so it looks a little bit more professional. There we go. Welcome, first-time chatters and continued fans of the channel. I appreciate you guys hanging out. I'm hoping that we can really build our community of like tactical superheroes when it comes to playing over the board, because there's no better way to improve your chess by then working on mate in 1, mate in 2 puzzles and tactical improvement. And I guarantee if you study that stuff every day, even if it's 20 puzzles a day and that's all you do, I can guarantee you will gain rating points. It's a fact. That's just how it is. So if you're out there listening to somebody about, I need to change my opening, I need to change this, I need to change that about your opening, it's not going to matter. It won't matter. Magnus even showed that he can play b3 and he can play these wild openings and play the first 5 moves without thinking. It doesn't even matter what first 5 moves he plays, and then he still wins. Why? It's because he has a better understanding of tactical ability and endgame play. That's it. I completely agree. Openings are good as long as you can keep advantage once you get it. That's exactly right. I mean, if you have the advantage and then you can't calculate a 2 or 3 move basic sequence, and you lose a piece after that, what's the point of playing that opening? So you have to be able to get comfortable, and then you have to be able to try to keep creating threats and tactical chances to win. Sometimes you won't get tactical chances. In my last game, there were very few, and my opponent played. I ended up winning the game, but my opponent played way above his level, like 300 points above his level. He was 1100, I'm 1500, so he's like 30, and he was playing a solid game. I really didn't have very many tactical chances, and you have to be able to account for that. When somebody has a great day and you don't have the best day, tactics is going to help you cover those bad days. So, study material. Any study of master combinations will show an almost infinite variety of breakthroughs involving sensitive squares around the enemy king. Computer eyes are greatly enhanced by a ready knowledge of recurring forcing moves against these targets. All right, does that make sense? A lot of times what they're trying to explain there is repetition, pattern recognition, why going through the Polgar book on a couple of occasions is helpful, why going through any tactical spaced repetition thing is good, because you're going to drill these patterns into your brain so when you see them, you can recognize them on the board very quickly. And when you recognize it, you don't really have to calculate. You just know it. I can identify Anastasia's mate. You can identify smothered mates and all of the other ones that are Philidor's mates and Greco's mate and all these other ones that are out there. You can recognize them and be like, oh, if I put my piece here, I can set this up. And it becomes knowledge instead of calculation. And it's always better knowing than it is having to calculate, right? Okay, next lesson. Holland versus Shaw. A. Stock attacks against the square h7. We begin with a very important stock mating net of a knight on f6 combined with a rook or a queen delivering mate on h7, f3, h2 in this example. So the idea here is you need to get a piece to this square, and if you can get a piece to that square, whether it's a rook or a queen, it's checkmate. So the idea is we're going to take this pawn. It's going to force the king to take, because the king has no moves to move to, no squares to move to. And then we're going to move our rook over here and put him in check. He can't take it because it's protected by the knight. So the king has to move back. It can't move here. And then when it moves back, we're going to deliver checkmate on h2 with the rook. It can't go here or here, and that's checkmate. Let's take a look. So what I was explaining before we just went into this is just knowing. I understand this pattern. I didn't even need this explanation. I saw the pieces and how they were oriented on the board, and I know that a knight and a rook next to a king like that is a mating pattern. And you will just start to identify these things the more you do them. All right, let's take a look. Oh, as always, if you are watching this as a video, as we're reading the description or whatever, go ahead and feel free to pause the video and try to figure it out for yourself. I urge you to do that on every single puzzle. Try to really calculate it out, and then you'll see the answer as you watch, which would be really good. So as long as you're doing all those things, I think that's perfect. All right, so right now we're actually in check, so we have to deal with that. The stockmate also works with the knight on f6 and a rook on g8 against the cornered king. Here, black was able to stop one incursion, but not the other. So here's the deal. Right now, we have to move, and we're in check. So we have to move the king. Now, the idea is, where do we move the king so that we do not get any more checks, or we're moving it to a safe place where we don't get checkmated ourselves? So there's a few things we have to worry about. This bishop's slicing in, so we have these. The rook is coming through, so we don't have these squares. We don't have this square. So we have this square and this square as potential places to move. Now, which one do we go to? Now, here's where you have to calculate to make sure you don't get checkmated. Right here, this is checkmate. We can see that. So even if we move up here and the knight moves back here, we have to be careful, because if he moves here, then we are going to be in checkmate. So we cannot move up. All right, does that make sense? So if we move here, we're going to block and be in check. Okay. We only have one move. We can only move here because the knight that's here is protecting this square. The pawn is protecting this square and this square. So we can't take the knight. The bishop is slicing through. And then the rook's going to come over and we're stuck. So the only move in the position is to come back. And it says alternative. That's interesting. How does that work? It wants us to go forward, but that's checkmate. What? Is there a move that I missed? Oh, because we can just take it. That's so there we go. Here's the problem with calculation. So you have to calculate every piece. I missed taking the knight, and that's the only move. Now moving here is checkmate. There's nothing I can do about it. So we have to take. There we go. And here we can deliver checkmate. Does that make sense? So yeah, if we go here, yeah, then we get stuck with that checkmate. So, or we lose the knight. But yeah, it's tricky. All right, next one. Here's a nice example of stock knight on f6 check, or knight on 6, knight f6 plus queen duo breaking into h7. With rook a5 hanging, white does not resort to a knee-jerk defensive play, but finds a crushing equal or stronger threat. And this is in chapter 5. So, the rook can be coming in, but it's blocked by the bishop. We have no way to move that bishop here, at least. Oh. So there's some checkmating possibilities here. But how do we reach those squares? There's no black bishop, so we don't really have a mate like that. So the idea is to try to maybe work backwards. So these are our two mating squares. So if we get a knight to either of these squares, we can potentially threaten checkmate. No, that's not what I would like to do. Sometimes when you click on the board, it just moves. So one of the ideas is a long maneuver, which is here, 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 which then threatens checkmate. But that's really long. Now we need to see if there's something that's potentially better, which I don't know that there is. Maybe there is. The other option is getting our bishop on this diagonal for that. But if we move here and they just take, now what? I feel like we've just lost a bishop with a potential pawn that could queen. That's scary. Knight e3. Idea, knight takes a5. Knight to g4. So yeah, maybe that's the case. So let's calculate. We have knight to e3, takes, take, and we move here. Are there any ways to stop it from happening? I think that might be our best way to go. Here, here, here. Are there any follow-ups? Here, here, and then it's checkmate to follow, so you can't stop that. Here's what, yeah, but queen can maybe potentially come to protect that, but the queen is here. So I think that might be our best move. All right, here, here. Oops. And now what? I don't see anything better, so. If he wants to stop checkmate, he's got to lose his queen for a knight, and then that's essentially a one game. So we were right. Very good. All right, next one. Similar things. Okay, so we have a defender here. Right now it would be checkmate if this knight was not here. So how can we remove the knight and still threaten checkmate? So we have two options. We can move the knight here, but that blocks our queen. The other option is to move here and go after the knight, and then we get checkmate. So let's calculate. If he goes here and he takes the knight to stop checkmate, we win the queen for two knights. I'm okay with that. That seems to be legit. Are there any weird things that he can do? If we move here, there's check, but we can take that, so that's not a big deal. There's no intermezzo action. If he doesn't do anything and he moves, if he just takes, then it's checkmate. If we move here and he moves his queen, we just take here, check. He's got to take the knight, and we still checkmate. So he took, and we're going to win the queen for two knights, which I am completely okay with. Perfect. All right, next one. Black expected a queen trade after. So I believe the issue is you're going to go here, check, and he's going to come here. And expecting the queen trade. So here, this one's a tricky one. So we're going to go here. He's going to stop with check. And we're going to go here. So if he takes the queen, which he most likely will, we can move our rook here and it's checkmate. If he doesn't do anything, we can just win the queen with our rook. These ones are these are tough to find unless you've been drilling them. You wouldn't. They're very difficult to find. And I mean, if you look, that's only a 3-move sequence, but it's not too hard to figure out, right? Like, But seeing it for the first time, you're kind of it's very difficult to figure out. Let's go through that one again, just because this is something that is extremely difficult to find, but once you start seeing these, they become easier and easier. So this move and this move should be really easy to find, and then you have to try to think another move and a half further. So we're going to put him in check. It's a forcing move. He has to block. Now what happens if he blocks with the rook? Well, that's just bad news, because then we can come here. And yeah, it's just not good at all. We can also come down here. So there's other things you might have to calculate, but the most forcing line is going to be this one, because black wants to force off the queens, and then it's kind of an even end game. So a lot of players will just say, oh, okay, I'm going to trade queens. All right. And then I'm going to put them in check, and I'm going to trade rooks. And then if you imagine this piece, this piece, this piece, and this piece off the board, and look at how even it would be. Now, I wish I could cover that up. If you cover it up with your hand on the screen, you can see what's left. There's the king in the corner with the pawn, 2 white bishops, and 4 pawns between the two of us. And it's probably drawish, but we don't want to draw, we want to win. So we threaten the queen. The queen has to move or take the rook. It can take the rook, or it can take here. It can't actually take the rook because you're pinned. So the power of a pin is extremely helpful. So you have to take. If you don't take, we're just going to win that piece and move on. All right, so he's going to move, and the bishop is protecting that square, and the king has no escape squares.